To be clear, this video is not intended to convince you that Capitano, Fatui Harbinger, is the Bloodstained Knight or isn't the Bloodstained Knight, but rather analyze the evidence for and against it. If you don't know who the Bloodstained Knight is, you should probably watch my summary video on the Bloodstained Knight, but otherwise, let's go ahead and get into it. Capitano being the Bloodstained Knight is, if not a popular theory, at least the most popular theory for Capitano's identity, and it's one that I see bandied around semi-often. There's a couple of reasons for it and a couple of reasons against it, and although none of them are quite conclusive enough to say definitively that he either is the Bloodstained Knight or isn't the Bloodstained Knight, there's still enough for a video, so hey. Starting off with a couple of reasons for the most obvious one, and probably the one that led people to connect the two characters in the first place, is appearance. The Bloodstained Knight wore a mask due to having gone from 10 out of 10 in looks to so ugly he made people run away and cry in fear. Meanwhile, Capitano also wears a mask, or at least shrouds his face in shadow, which is close enough to a mask that it would at least accomplish the same goal and brings to mind the Bloodstained Knight. Second off, fighting abilities. The Bloodstained Knight was a skilled swordsman trained by the second-in-command of the Knights of Favonius. Capitano is also renowned for his strength, and it doesn't seem implausible that with an additional 500 years of experience, the Bloodstained Knight could have become powerful enough to be someone like Capitano. Furthermore, Capitano is known for being a righteous individual, which would fit with the Bloodstained Knight's description of being a particularly justice-oriented person who cares a lot about morals and all those sorts of things. Similarly, Capitano is described by Scaramouche as being ever righteous, having absolute righteousness, etc. Not in flattering terms, because, well, Scaramouche, but in general, it would fit with the Bloodstained Knight. There's also the narrative point to consider. In real life, it would be ridiculous to assume that these two seemingly unrelated people are the same person. But Genshin isn't real life. Genshin is fiction, which means that it likes to follow narrative conservation of detail. Hoyoverse is significantly more likely to give us information that will be relevant in the future, or at least tie into something, than something useless and unrelated. La Signora turning out to be the Crimson Witch of Flames is the most obvious example, but even something like the records of Zandik, who's pretty likely to be Dottore, being accessible in-game, rather than, records from some other random researcher who's dead and irrelevant, is another, instance of this conservation of detail, where Genshin doesn't provide us with random unrelated information. They prefer to give us things that are connected, because there's only so many gigabytes that you have to store the game, and there's only so much time their writers have to make these little interactables, and there's only so much interest that people would have in completely unrelated events in artifact and weapon lore. Moving on, motivations. The Bloodstained Knight turned against the gods after finding out about the Conrian curse, the Hilichurl thing, etc., and the Fatui seek to cleanse the gods, so their goals would align, and it could make sense that the Bloodstained Knight would potentially join the Fatui in order to accomplish that end goal of New World Order, cleanse the gods, get rid of the heavenly principles, etc. Finally, for reasons 4, this one's pretty obvious but pretty important, which is that at his last known sighting, the Bloodstained Knight was alive. It's a little hard to join the Fatui if you're dead, and it's not necessarily impossible because ghosts exist in Genshin, and we have maybe hints towards resurrection, but to say the least, it would be a pretty big blow to the theory if the Bloodstained Knight were dead. But no, the last time we saw him, at least, he was alive. That said, the last time we saw him was also 500 years ago, which brings us into a couple of reasons against the theory. First off is lifespan, of course. The Bloodstained Knight lived 500 years ago, and given current knowledge, he was a normal mortal, unless the Abyss Order changed him somehow, which is not something that has been indicated. Although other Harbingers have been known to survive for centuries, there are known methods for each Harbinger who has lived past a normal mortal lifespan. Signora had her whole become liquid flame witch thing going on, Piero has his Conrian curse of immortality, Scaramouche is a puppet and doesn't age, Dottore has his puppet bodies with different ages that presumably would let him avoid death for similar reasons as Scaramouche. Also, we have to consider that the Abyss and the Fatui are not exactly entities that are the best of friends. The Fatui are an anti-Abyss organization, and Signora herself was convinced to join by Piero talking about how the Fatui fought against the Abyss. However, the Bloodstained Knight swore his loyalty to the Abyss Order. If Capitano is the Bloodstained Knight, something must have happened off-screen to change his loyalty from the Abyss Order to the Fatui, which is a pretty large assumption. Similarly, the Fatui are also not exactly renowned for being an upstanding organization that uses only the most moral methods to achieve their goals. The Bloodstained Knight was focused enough on justice that he dedicated his life to slaughtering monsters after the Cataclysm, and then ended up changing his loyalty to the very monsters he had fought against. Would he really work with an organization that has Dottore as one of his top leaders? It's possible, but at least with what he's seen of him, it seems a little unlikely. Also, the Fatui have acted against Mondstadt several times, causing the deaths of civilians, see the whole Kripis monsters lured to attack him thing, and attempting to undermine the government is also something the Fatui have done in Mondstadt. We don't know for sure that the Bloodstained Knight retained his loyalty to Mondstadt even after pledging to the Abyss, but it seems unlikely that the Bloodstained Knight, as presented in Bloodstained Chivalry and the Black Sword, would be okay with the Fatui doing things like luring monsters to attack Mondstadt's civilians. That's all I have to say on the subject of evidence for, evidence against. I'm sure there's probably other things that I forgot about, didn't bring up, didn't think about, whatever. If you have any of those, would love to hear them, because this is honestly a theory that I find really interesting. But in a couple of ending notes, one, it would be pretty funny if Capitano was the Bloodstained Knight, since either A, he never said a word to an amnesiac Rosalind Signora about their shared past, or B, which I find funnier, is that he did say something and she had no idea what he was talking about. I guess it does raise the question of if the other Harbingers were aware she had amnesia, but, well, whatever. In any case, do I personally think Capitano is the Bloodstained Knight? Maybe. I'm not convinced. Mostly because there's a fair bit of evidence against it, and some of that evidence is pretty severe, particularly the Bloodstained Knight pledge to the Abyss, Fatui hate the Abyss, and also lifespan, etc. But there are enough connections between the two characters that I think it is possible. On a more emotional level, the Bloodstained Knight is also my favorite character, so at least if he's Capitano, that means he's alive. We'll get more content about him, hopefully, and he might be playable, so I'm hoping that they're the same person, even if I don't believe in the theory. In conclusion, possible, maybe even plausible, but there is evidence against the Bloodstained Knight being Capitano, so nothing is quite conclusive. In any case, thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and have a great day.